thank you for joining the Revenue Optimists. We're a space where revenue operations leaders and go-to-market operations folks can come together to learn from one another in order to grow their businesses. My name is Dave Nelson, and today I'm very fortunate to be joined by Eric Chapman, the Vice President of Sales Operations and Enablement at Hexagon. So Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm a practitioner by heart. I've worked my way up over the years in many different roles in sales operations and enablement functions. Everything from orders and renewals all the way through sales planning and strategy and compensation and ultimately landed on my last couple of years leading sales operations and CRM ecosystems.
Wow.
A lot of fun, a lot of diversity in the role, and always plenty of challenges to address.
Fantastic. Well, and I know you've been at it for a while. I think you come to us with over 25 years experience. So you've probably seen and done a ton.
It's been a great experience. I think coming from Hewlett Packard for almost 20 years there, and all the acquisitions and divestitures, and that was great experiences at a very large scale enterprise. And then I moved over to Hexagon back in 2018, and got to experience a very heavy growth company, with lots of acquisitions and much smaller operations, but bringing them into a modernized, digitalized world.
That's great. So you've seen both big and small and growing.
It's been a tremendous opportunity.
That's great. That's awesome. Actually, do you mind telling us a little bit more about Hexagon and what they do?
Absolutely. So we have quite a few divisions of the company that cover many different industries and technologies, everything from geospatial mapping to digital scanning. Our division specifically is called Asset Lifecycle Intelligence, and we operate in everything from the design of facilities and refineries and digital twins, et cetera, all the way through to asset tracking, asset management, cyber technology, cyber monitoring, both in perpetual and SaaS models. So very diverse business. Design, operate, maintain, secure, many different facets of operations functions, and a vast number of industries that we operate in as well.
We know that in traditional kind of bull markets, that I think Gartner says there's usually between like 6 and 10 people involved in a buying committee. Now that's in a bull market. Right now in this bear market, I wonder if there's even more than that. So how do you tend to operationalize that across your team, or have you done anything to try and help facilitate that?
Yeah, we've tried to tackle that at two levels: the account and looking overarching at the account, who are all the players inside the account, and being able to see that relationship map, from a planning and strategy perspective. We really encourage the reps to do that, not just once a year at the beginning of the year, but to keep that maintained for their key accounts, and really understand what's happening inside the account. I mean, people are moving all around all the time between executive roles inside a company and outside of their company. So not knowing how that network of leaders is changing, and some of the biases that can come in with those leaders. Oh, that's an IBM leader, or that's a this, that, and the other. I mean, it has an impact if you go mid-cycle on 4 or 5 different strategies, and somebody comes in and they have a tendency to go with a different company as their primary strategy. So that's the account side of it. And then we do similar at the opportunity level, where the sellers can create the opportunity team, both internal, who do they need inside of our company to address this account, as well as the customer's buying side relationship or network. And also add that extra, it's not just an org chart, it's who is a proponent of us, who's helping us shepherd that deal through on the customer buying side, who are the resistors, or the decision makers that don't want to talk to you at all, so how many layers is this going to have to go through for approval, and try to bring that intelligence into the opportunity level, and makes for a much different discussion with the sales account team and the sales management team and the executive team above them inside of our company on how they can help. They might know some of those key players at those levels, or it might open the door for a different conversation that will help that seller, progress the solution for the customer, and really focus on what the customer needs instead of on the approval process itself.
Oh, that's great. And so it sounds like you've put some work into actually having the teams do that, both at the account level and at the opportunity level, which I can totally understand. Accounts probably much bigger. There's a lot more players, but for this opportunity, you might only have the 6 to 10 buyers or whatever. What kind of impact have you seen that have on your sales overall?
So I think the more at the foundation level, sellers don't want to put contacts into CRM. That's my contact. You're trying to get that out of their head and put it into CRM. Fundamentally, that's against the natural state of a seller. These are my people. This is my account, my contacts, and I know who to contact. So we've automated all emails and Outlook appointments that go to our customers from our sellers. Those contacts get automatically added into our CRM and associated with the account, and that specific account that the opportunity is opened against. So it's very site specific, if you will. That has put in 85,000 contacts into our CRM in a little over a year.
Wow.
So imagine all 85,000 of those was not company intelligence until we got it into our CRM, because any one of those reps could walk out the door with those contacts. We would never know who they are or who they were talking to, unless we were going back through everybody's email. So that was our first step, was just make it super easy to get those contacts in, and then you've got the information sitting there for the rep that they can build that org chart of who's who in that network of names that are on an Outlook appointment or a meeting invite or an email string. The second piece of that, I think it certainly has changed the discussion for the sellers and sales managers and the account team when they're talking more holistically about all the people that are involved, because they start talking about the process of the selling to the different various entities on the buying side, instead of it just being this milestone of, well, we're presenting and we're waiting for an answer, or we're waiting for the purchase authorization, from who, for how many levels does that have to go through? It goes from almost a binary discussion with the rep about the opportunity to a very dynamic discussion about what's the process we're going to go through to get the right people to say this solution meets their needs or exceeds their needs, and now they're shepherding it through their side to get it financially approved. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. When our team, we build out the influence maps in these opportunities to see, well, who are we talking to, but who are the decision makers, and are we talking to them or not? And usually as you progress through a deal, you won't be talking to the decision maker to begin with. You'll need to first find out who that decision maker is, and maybe there's multiple, and then strategize on how we're going to get in front of them, or at least how we're going to get our point of contacts to advocate for us into those. I've found that it's super beneficial for young reps, right? Because a lot more tenured reps, although I love your point. I love that these tenured reps, they just know it in their head and they don't necessarily want to give it to you. But they inherently do that. They know that they need to get to the decision maker. They're not talking to them yet. Whereas we're young reps, they'll have rose-colored glasses. Yeah. And they'll say, hey, I'm talking to this point of contact. He'll pick up the phone anytime I call him. He'll email me back right away. And they won't recognize necessarily that this isn't the person that I need to get to. And in fact, it almost hurts, because the longer they interact with this point of contact, the harder it is to try and go above them to get to the people who really matter.
Yeah.
And so I found it as a really good strategy, because as you're a sales leader on these calls, you're hearing about these names and you remember from the week before, oh yeah, okay, I recognize that, but who's who again? And until you can actually see it in that influence map that you don't really understand who's who. And then you can all of a sudden have this strategy conversation to try and provide some wisdom into, okay, well, we've done this in the past and we've seen that we're going to need to get to a few other people. And these are the tactics, like you mentioned, either the flanking or the direct and whatnot approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And then knowing as much as you can about those people up in that hierarchy. I think that's the days of you looked in LinkedIn and tried to figure out who they were, but that doesn't tell you what their bias is. It doesn't tell you, their history of who they bought from at their prior company. There's so much more data now available to understand, what your resistance factors are going to be even before you have the first conversation with the person, on the phone. And if I know that, my competitor knows that too. And so if they're better at it, they've already got ahead before we've even had the first conversation with that decision maker. They could have a 2 steps ahead of us if we're not doing that same thing. So it's often just keeping up with where the technology is taking us and what's available to us for information that isn't information overload, but it's actionable information. It's going to change how I go and present, my proposal to that leadership team. I think that for me is a challenge every day. I mean, I can't keep up with all the AI, it's,
Oh my goodness.
it's coming from every direction right now.
Yeah.
And it is so much information, but is it actionable? And making sure that whatever we give the seller team is not just information overload, it's actionable.
Absolutely. And on that note, so there's the whole sales side of things where they want to be able to strategize and see who's who and try and work their way up to decision makers and whatnot. There's a marketing component to it as well. And I think on a couple fronts, there's the whole account-based marketing movement and recognizing who are we really going to spend some money on, right? We're going to send them to a really expensive steak dinner or whatever, but we only want to do it if they're a certain level. But there's also just the standard traditional marketing where they need to know both who they should be going after, but also who can we attribute to any of the campaigns that we've already done. And if they're not added to an opportunity, it's really tough to recognize that recognition. What do you recommend there for how you kind of attribute those for marketing?
Marketing to opportunity standard metrics. What are we influencing? Are we directly tied to this opportunity? Making its way in as an opportunity to sell. That you still have that age-old thing where one group wants to claim we've generated, $5 billion in influence, and the other team says, what? I get 4 leads a month at best. So it's that balance between those two functions to work them together rather than counting everything separately, and then you have this adversarial, type of a relationship there. So.
Totally. No, I agree. And you know what? We've actually found a lot of success using these influence maps and whatnot, because the reps are effectively telling you specifically who are the people that actually matter. Because you might be in a meeting and 23 people get added, but only 8 really talk, right? And then you're following up with those 8 and the others are just silent. You don't need to add the 23 people to that opportunity. But by focusing on the people who are influencing it and whatnot, as long as those are added as like contact roles to the opportunity, marketing now can recognize who are those folks. They can then market to them more effectively, but they can also recognize the attribution. If they had sent them to that steak dinner or not, they might have sent someone that had no influence on it. And that's all good learning that they've found, so that now they know in the future who to be involved and who not to, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a challenge, because you could have that one person sitting on the phone that says nothing, and you find out later they were a decision maker.
Yeah, totally.
So you're all these dynamics that you're trying to systematize, to an extent, but you can't systematize all these outliers. So
totally
get 80%. If the sales organization says, "Wow, that was a big help," that's a step forward for us that we've never had before. That's a win to me. Not, is it perfect?
Absolutely. I totally agree. Okay, so if we distill it back then for those relationship maps or those influence maps, why are they so important for improving your win rates in your sales team?
We've certainly seen where the rep pulls in and understands that buying team, they can bring that deal in, on the shorter duration than the deals that they're not aware of the buying team, and that that their optimism, their rosy colored glasses again are telling them they're going to get it this quarter, and then it goes to the next quarter, and then it goes to the next quarter, and they're slowly working their way up that chain. That's where I've seen more of the buying team closing that time to close the deal. They're also getting better information about what's really happening on the customer side for their decision making. For is it their fiscal year, they have to use the budget before the end of the year, or it's not going to happen this year, we don't even have the funds available. They're getting to that level of the leadership team for those kinds of insights faster with that buying team, insights into the full buying team. The single threaded deals, it's one thing that's almost very predictable unless they're very transactional deals, because we do have some transactional parts of our portfolio where it could just be a single buyer, they are the decision maker, that and that works really well. But for the larger enterprise accounts, whenever I see one contact on an opportunity and the rep saying I'm just waiting for the PO, I know they're not that deal's not coming in. It's just not going to make it based on their projections, and it's pretty quick to see that. And the frontline managers can also see that and coach in that case. So and ask those questions. Who is that person's boss? What department are they part of? Is there another department that has to approve this deal, and so on and so forth. So,
or whose budget it has to come out of, or whatnot. So
exactly.
on that note, for those sales leaders, how are they tending to operationalize this? Like, is it something you put in place and your sales reps just kind of ran with, or was it something you had to more coach and train and enable them on? Or
we had to coach and train it, absolutely, because many of those sales managers were sales reps, so they're super sellers. So that's not necessarily a behavior that they're going to look for those same things that they didn't look for or do when they were sellers. So we had to ingrain that methodology of doing a deal review and looking at the relationship map or our customer network map, looking at the assessment of the opportunity and discussing that, and instead of it being more about where's this deal at in the pipeline, when are you going to close it, it was more of shifting it from a sales rep conversation about the opportunity to a coaching conversation about the opportunity. And I think that's there's a big distinction between those two camps.
No, I totally agree. And so it sounds like perhaps in conjunction with the sales leader, then, that the sales reps are kind of building these out to strategize and coach versus forcing them to do it, or hoping they would do it on their own.
And we're also, I think this is, back to that whole concept I remember from 15, 20 years ago, the CRM, customer relationship management, and the intent was that it was a full account team, and all the information about the customer was going to be there, all the information about the selling and account team, pre-sales, sales leadership, support, case information, order management information, everything was going to be inside this hub of CRM. And that would be nirvana, but it isn't that way for any company that I'm aware of. So we're starting to expand into those other roles, so that pre-sales can contribute to that intelligence, to that opportunity. Services can participate in that opportunity, the intelligence at the opportunity level. They can add contacts, they can add context, to that selling. Hey, I was on this call with the IT department manager talking a little bit more technically about the solution, and he said ABC that could help you, with the sales approach. So really collaborating on that opportunity is what I would love to enable. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, we're not going to stop the opportunity from progressing or anything,
Sure.
But we make it easy for them to do that on the opportunity as an account team. I think that will, again, make it, give them unmeasurable benefits that we can, add to that ability to win that deal.
That's such a good point, because I can imagine that the other players involved in that same opportunity, not just the account executive, but the overlay, the pre-sales engineer, whatever it is that you might call them, might have different insights. They might have picked up on different things to add to that map to be able to strategize together.
Yeah, a good example came up the other day. A rep was progressing a deal through, and that customer hadn't paid their bill for 2 quarters,
Oh.
internally. And the messages that were coming from our accounts receivable, to the customer, reminding them that they needed to pay their invoices, got to the same person that the sales rep was trying to pitch to, ultimately in the decision making. And I think, when you're thinking about things from just one function, the messaging can be very direct and not thinking about that we might be selling at the same time into this account. So, internally, we had a good conversation about that because we could see that activity was going on, and the seller and the collections department, the order management team, strategized about how to then pitch this whole thing more holistically to the customer. And they, ended up renegotiating the contract, changing some of the existing open debt that the customer needed to pay us for, and finish the solution going forward. And it all wrapped up in a great total solution for the customer, and ultimately, met their needs and met our needs too. So, I think those kinds of collaborative environments are often very difficult to inside of our companies when their functions are siloed and not talking to one another. And we make it just as hard to close a deal from our internal functions as it is on the customer side, to close the decisions on their end.
Amazing. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for walking us through that. Yeah, there seems to be a ton of benefits, and I like how you guys have operationalized it internally.